Sit down. That's the only thing Mr. Delton said as I stepped into his office. No greeting. No acknowledgement that I'd just buried the man who raised me. His eyes didn't soften when he met mine, they hardened, as if he had already made up his mind. I sat, my hands folded in my lap, knuckles white. He didn't even lift his head fully when he muttered, "For days."
"For whole days, Madison."
Without a single update. I swallowed. My father died. I emailed HR. He finally looked at me then.
Cold. Calculated.
Like I was just another spreadsheet line that didn't balance. And I consider that disloyalty. That word, disloyalty, it hit like a slap. I blinked. I gave you 11 years. His tone sharpened. Which makes your absence even more disappointing. We had clients waiting. Deadlines missed. You left your team scrambling. My father was buried less than 36 hours ago. He leaned back. And now, you'll have plenty of time to grieve. You're terminated, effective immediately. Clean out your desk before noon. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse him. I just stood, silent, my heels clicking once on the marble floor as I turned. That's when he said, almost lazily, "Close the door behind you."
I did.
And I never looked back. But that evening I made a phone call. Just one. To a man named Leonard Blake. A name that would mean nothing to most people. But in the corporate world, he was the kind of man whose signature could shift the market. A man who owed me a favor, one I never called in.
Until that night.
I didn't even have to say much. "Are you still interested in acquiring Delcorp?"
I asked. A pause.
Then a soft chuckle. "You were never going to ask, were you? Until now." "I'll need 72 hours. You have 48. Done." I hung up. And that was the beginning of the end. Not for me. For him.
I didn't sleep that night.
I didn't eat. I sat in my small apartment, staring out at the flickering skyline, thinking of all the times I'd sacrificed birthdays, vacations, and relationships for that job. For that man. 11 years of skipping dinners, staying late, and biting my tongue when he took credit for my work. And now, I was discarded like an expired coffee pod. But I wasn't angry.
No.
I was focused. Delcorp wasn't just a company. It was a rotting kingdom built on loyalty bled dry and broken promises. And the man on the throne was about to choke on his own crown. Because I knew everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Every backdoor deal. Every lawsuit he buried. Every employee he pushed out and silenced. I had receipts, emails, voice memos, and more importantly, his signature on more than one document that could end him. But I wasn't interested in exposing him. I wanted something far more satisfying. I wanted to own him.
Personally, professionally, publicly.
The next morning, I wore black. Not because I was mourning. Because I was hunting. I showed up to a quiet cafe in Manhattan where Leonard Blake sat in the back, sipping tea like the billionaire he was. He didn't stand when I approached, just slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" I asked, sitting down. "A skeleton. One of many in Delton's closet. I thought you'd enjoy choosing which one to pull out first." I opened the folder. And smiled. "Oh, he'll hate this." Leonard's lips twitched. "We're acquiring 60% of Delcorp shares. Quietly. By Monday, the board will know." "He won't. Until it's too late." "And my role?" He slid a card across the table. "Chief Executive Officer." I stared at it. That title. After all the nights I worked under his name. I want to be there when he finds out. Leonard raised his cup. "Oh, you will." Monday morning came colder than usual. Not because of the weather, but because of what was about to unfold inside the 22nd floor of Delcorp. At exactly 8:59 a.m., I stepped through those sleek, glass doors for the first time, not as an employee, but as the incoming CEO. No ID badge. No staff pass. I didn't need one anymore. "Excuse me," the receptionist stuttered, standing. "You were terminated last week." I smiled slow. "Please let Mr. Delton know that Ms. Madison Pierce would like to see him." The name still stung her. I could see it. I was the employee who gave this company more than a decade, and yet I was tossed like a file gone stale. The receptionist hesitated. He's in a meeting. I leaned forward. Trust me, he'll want to cancel it. She picked up the phone nervously. I could hear the murmur of her voice through the earpiece. 30 seconds later, she put it down. He said to leave the premises immediately. I smirked. Wrong move, Delton. Because the elevator behind me dinged, and out stepped Leonard Blake, flanked by two men in suits and Delcorp CFO, James Lockhart, who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. The receptionist went pale. Leonard walked straight past her desk, nodding at me. Come along, Madison. Time for introductions. I followed. We entered the glass-walled boardroom, where the table was already full of confused directors, analysts, and a few faces I hadn't seen in years. Whispers started the moment they saw me. She was fired. Did she sneak in? Wait, is that Blake? And then came him, William Delton, his tie crooked, his walk slower than usual. He didn't recognize what was happening. Yet. Until he saw me sitting at the head of the table. His brows twitched. You're not supposed to be. Leonard raised a hand. Calm. Powerful. Mr. Delton, he began smoothly. As of this morning, a controlling interest in Delcorp has been transferred. My firm now holds 60.4% of shares. Delton blinked. That's impossible. We would have known. You didn't, Leonard interrupted. Because we didn't want you to. I leaned back in the chair that used to be his. And effective immediately, Leonard continued, this company's board has elected a new CEO. Delton stared, breath hitching. Ms. Madison Pierce. Silence. For a second, even the HVAC seemed to pause. His voice cracked. She's not qualified. She's not. She was an assistant. I stood. And I said it loud. For 11 years, I was the one drafting your contracts, leading your teams when you left early, calming your clients when you threw tantrums. I stayed late to fix your messes, took the blame for your negligence, and trained every junior who left this company because of your abuse. He turned red. This is a coup. No, Leonard said, taking a seat beside me. This is justice. Delton laughed. Bitter. Desperate. You won't last. The board will never accept her. But one by one, they nodded. Every person at that table, those who once ignored me, overlooked me, dismissed me, were now looking at me like I'd just pulled off the impossible. And I had. Delton's voice rose. You think this is over, Madison? You think I won't fight this? I looked him dead in the eye. No, Will. I think you'll scream, beg, and maybe even cry, but it won't matter. Because the moment you signed that last loan agreement and falsified those earnings reports, I had you. His lips parted. How? You left the documents in my inbox when you fired me, I said quietly. Didn't even think to revoke my access. I slid a file across the table, his forged signature highlighted in red. By the time you're done explaining this to the SEC, I added, you'll be lucky if you can sell insurance in Florida. He didn't speak. He couldn't. And in that silence, I finally exhaled. Not because I had won, but because I had survived. This time, on my own terms. I expected him to yell, to threaten, to lunge across the table. But William Delton just stood there, like a man who'd walked out onto a frozen lake and heard the first loud crack beneath his feet. His jaw clenched, his fists balled. But no words came. Only the sound of a man's ego imploding in real time. I leaned forward slowly. You always said loyalty mattered most. I was loyal for 11 years, William. But you weren't. Not to me. Not to your clients. Not even to this company. A beat of silence passed before he spun on his heel and stormed out. Fast, stiff, like someone trying to outrun humiliation. The boardroom didn't stop him. No one stood. No one followed. That's how far he'd fallen. That's what arrogance leaves behind. I didn't watch him leave. Instead, I turned to the table. We'll begin restructuring today. There will be layoffs, strategic ones. But they won't be based on personal grudges, favoritism, or ego. This company will rebuild with integrity. with real leadership. And it starts now. The air shifted, from stiff disbelief to wary hope. I could feel their eyes on me, some skeptical, some relieved, others simply stunned. I didn't care. I wasn't here to please anyone. I was here to lead. 3 hours later, I walked into my old office. Except it wasn't my office anymore. Not the assistant cubicle with no window. Not the desk tucked behind a vending machine.
No.
This one had glass walls, a view of the skyline, and a brass plate with my name on the door. Madison Pierce, CEO. I stood in the center for a moment, letting it sink in. Then I dropped my bag and sat down in the leather chair he used to sit in. It still smelled like cologne and cigars, like ego and old money. I opened a drawer. There it was. A silver pen he used to sign contracts with, custom engraved. I remembered him once saying, "This pen signed billion-dollar deals. Not bad for a guy with no degree." Now it sat in my drawer. I closed it again. Let him keep his relics. I had better things to build. Around noon, I received an email from HR. Subject line, Final paycheck. William Delton. Attached was a request, written by William himself, asking to expedite the finalization of his severance package. He was trying to take the money and run. But what he didn't know was that I'd frozen his payout. Legally. Because tucked into his employment contract was a clause I had helped draft years ago, requiring board approval for severance in the event of just cause termination. And fraud? That was more than enough cause. I sent back a 3-word reply. Request denied. MP. That afternoon, I walked down the same hallway where he used to strut like he owned the place, where I once trailed behind him, unnoticed, unappreciated, unheard. This time, people parted. Some clapped. Some looked away. But they all saw me. Not the girl who stayed late. Not the one who fetched his coffee. Not the one who quietly left after being told she was disloyal for mourning her father.
No.
They saw a woman who came back from nothing and took everything back. Without rage. Without screaming. Without begging. Just power. Precision. And silence. Because silence isn't weakness. Silence is patience sharpening its blade. That night, I sat alone on my new balcony, watching the city. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just stared at the skyline, this glass jungle that had chewed me up and spit me out, and now had my name on one of its highest towers. Not because I played the game, but because I learned how to break its rules better than the men who made them. I thought of my father, of the funeral I never really got to grieve. "Dad," I whispered, "I wish you could see this." And for the first time in days, I smiled. Because somewhere deep down I knew he already did. Tuesday morning started with rain. Heavy, relentless, loud. Like the city was washing something off its skin. I stood by the window of my new corner office, watching it streak across the glass. In the reflection, I saw the woman I'd become.
Steady. Sharpened.
Unafraid. But just beneath that calm exterior, something else stirred.
Grief.
My father's voice still echoed in the spaces between my victories. In the silence after the meetings. In the pause before I spoke. "Stand tall, even when it hurts," he used to say. Especially when it hurts. And it did. It still did. But today I'd use the pain. The day began with meetings. Department heads pouring into the boardroom, expecting chaos or vengeance. They got neither. I listened. I asked hard questions. I fired 2 toxic senior managers who had been protected by Delton for years. No drama. No shouting. Just signatures. By noon, morale had shifted. People didn't know if they could trust me yet, but they knew I wasn't afraid to do what Delton never had. Make decisions that weren't self-serving. At 2:30 p.m., I received an unexpected visit. James Lockhart, the CFO, stepped into my office, shutting the door gently behind him. "I owe you an apology," he said, hands folded. I knew he was bleeding money from that client merger. I didn't speak up. I nodded. "You're speaking now." He exhaled, looking out at the storm. "People think what you did was revenge. But I see it now. It was rescue. I turned to face him. I'm not here to play hero, but I won't let this company rot from the inside out. He nodded. Quiet. Then left. Later that evening, as the office began to clear out, I walked the halls again. No bodyguards. No assistants trailing behind me. Just me. I paused at the old break room. The same one where I'd once cried after being screamed at for a typo that wasn't mine. The same one where I overheard Delton mocking my sad little work shoes to a group of executives. Now I owned the break room, and the office, and the company, and every employee who'd ever been stepped on, dismissed, or pushed out. I carried them with me. Not as a burden, but as a blueprint for how I'd rebuild this place. That night, I stopped by a small flower shop near my apartment. It was quiet. The kind of place with real wood floors and a little bell that jingled when you walked in. I bought a simple bouquet, white lilies, my dad's favorite. And instead of going straight home, I took the subway, all the way to Brooklyn, to the cemetery. The rain had turned into mist now, gentle and quiet. I stood by his grave, kneeling to place the flowers. Hey, Dad, I whispered. They fired me. The wind shifted. But I came back, I said, voice cracking. And I took it all. I closed my eyes. It wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming what I gave, what you raised me to give. I stood, and I smiled through the tears. I finally used the voice you gave me. I didn't post about it online. No dramatic press release. No revenge blog. I just kept showing up. Stronger, clearer, untouchable. And the word began to spread. Other companies started calling. Other assistants. Other women. People who'd seen what I did and wanted to know how. I told them all the same thing. I didn't climb a ladder. I built a new one. Because sometimes success isn't loud. It's silent, but it's steady. And when it lands, it shakes everything. 3 months passed. In that time, the headlines shifted from gossip to admiration. Former assistant takes over empire she helped build. The silent powerhouse behind Delcorp's turnaround. She was fired for grieving her father. Now she's the boss. They wanted interviews, TV appearances, magazine covers. I turned down most of them. Because the truth is, when you've been underestimated for so long, the real reward isn't telling the world who you are. It's watching the world realize it on its own. But one invitation I didn't decline. A leadership summit in San Francisco.
They wanted me to speak.
Not as a CEO. Not as a viral headline. But as a woman who came back stronger. I stood on stage in front of hundreds. Maybe thousands. And I said, I didn't set out to destroy anyone. I set out to be heard. After 11 years of silence, I finally made them listen. People clapped. But one girl in the third row, she didn't clap. She just stared at me, wide-eyed, frozen. Like she was trying to memorize this moment. I knew that look. Because I was her once. The girl afraid to ask for a raise. The woman apologizing for taking up space. The employee who worked twice as hard for half the credit. I nodded at her. Because her time would come. And I hoped she'd burn every bridge that wasn't worth crossing. Just like I had. Back in New York, Delcorp was thriving. The board meetings no longer felt like Shark Tanks. Employees who'd once whispered in the break room now spoke up in meetings. We'd started a mentorship program, hired a new wellness lead, and for the first time in its 20-year history, Delcorp offered paid bereavement leave. That one, I personally wrote into policy, because no one else should be fired for being human. And William Delton? Last I heard, he tried to start a podcast. The Real World of Business. It flopped. A month in, he'd only had 12 listeners. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him harm. I simply didn't care anymore. Because the opposite of revenge isn't forgiveness. It's freedom. One afternoon, as I was leaving the building, the same receptionist who once told me to leave stood up quickly when she saw me. Miss Pierce, she called out. I turned. She looked nervous. I never got to say I'm sorry for that day. I smiled. You were doing your job. She nodded. almost tearing up. But I watched what you did, what you became. And I just wanted to say, thank you for coming back. I paused, then walked over and took her hand. Thank you, I said, for staying. Because not everyone runs when things break. Some people wait, and some of them rise with you when you return. That night, I sat by the window again. No glass towers this time. Just stars. Just silence. I thought of all the late nights, the slammed doors, the invisible victories, and the phone call that changed everything. Just one call. That's all it took. Not rage. Not war. Just the courage to reclaim what was mine. Because in the end, I wasn't fired. I was freed. And when they pushed me out the door, they didn't realize they'd just given me the perfect runway to rise.